Hey, my name is Cal Merritt. I'm 32 years old and I live in Hartwell, Georgia. It's a small town. The kind where the gas station attendant knows your truck by sound and the diner hasn't changed its menu since 1987. I've lived here my whole life, except for 2 years in Savannah for trade school, and I came back because Eleanor was here. And then Eleanor wasn't anywhere anymore. But I was still here, so. I'm an electrician. Have been since I was 19. It's not the kind of job that makes for good stories at dinner parties, though I don't go to dinner parties, so maybe I'm wrong about that. Mostly I pull wire through walls that haven't been opened since the Carter administration, replace breaker panels in houses that smell like old dog and older carpet, and fix things that were installed wrong by someone who watched one YouTube video and felt confident about it. My day starts before 6. Coffee from a machine that needs descaling and I keep meaning to do it. The smell of solder and copper by 7. The specific weight of a tool belt after 8 hours, low on the hips, familiar as a bad habit. I drive a '09 Silverado with a crack in the dashboard that I've been meaning to fill for 2 years. The radio sticks between stations sometimes and plays 2 things at once. I've stopped noticing. Eleanor died 18 months ago. Ovarian cancer. We had 14 months between the diagnosis and the end, which sounds like a long time and is not. I spent most of it learning how to cook food she could actually keep down, how to change in 4-line, how to sleep sitting up in a hospital chair without my back locking completely. She had a Friday night ritual. Every Friday, after dinner, she'd make me drive us out on Route 9 toward the county line and back. No reason. Just the dark road and the radio and her hand on the gearshift beside mine. She said it reset something in her. I didn't need it reset, but I went because she wanted to go. After she died, I kept driving it. I don't know why. I told myself it was just a route. A road. 20 minutes of nothing. But I drove it every Friday night for 18 months, which is 78 Fridays, which is not the behavior of a man who thinks it's just a road. I don't talk about Eleanor much. Hartwell is small and everyone already knows what happened and sympathy gets heavy after a while. You can only carry someone else's careful looks for so long before you start avoiding places where people look at you. Tonight was a Friday. It was raining the way it rains in Georgia in late October, not dramatic, just relentless. Like the sky had made a decision and wasn't reconsidering. I had the defroster running and the wipers on high and Eleanor's recipe card tucked in the sun visor where she put it as a joke once, years ago, and I never took it down. I was coming back on Route 9, headlights cutting maybe 30 feet into the rain, when I saw something white on the shoulder. I thought it was a deer. Then I thought it was trash, a plastic bag, something blown off a truck. Then it moved. And I saw it was a woman. Standing completely still on the shoulder of the road in a wedding dress, soaked through, one hand flat against her side and one hand holding nothing. No umbrella. No phone in her hand. No car nearby. Just standing there in the rain like she'd decided the road was as good a place as any. I slowed down. I stopped. I sat there for a moment with the wipers going and the rain loud on the roof, and I thought about all the reasonable things a person does in this situation. Then I leaned over and pushed open the passenger door. She looked at the open door. Then at me. Water running off her face in lines. She climbed in. She pulled the door shut. The sound of the rain dropped by half. She sat with her hands in her lap, the dress taking up most of the seat, white and soaked and muddy at the hem. She was breathing steady. Not crying. Just breathing. I waited. She looked straight ahead through the windshield at the rain. Just drive, she said. Please. So I drove. I didn't ask where she wanted to go. That probably sounds strange. A soaked woman in a wedding dress climbs into your truck on a dark road and says drive, and you just drive. But I've rewired enough old houses to know that when something is overloaded, you don't add more current. You just let it sit. You wait for the heat to come down before you touch anything. So I drove. She didn't look at me. She looked at the road the way you look at something when you're not really seeing it. Her hands were in her lap, fingers laced together, and she had a small beaded clutch pressed between her arm and her ribs like she'd forgotten it was there. Her hair was dark and coming loose from whatever it had been pinned into. There was a smear of something, mascara or mud, maybe both, along her left cheekbone that she hadn't wiped away. The rain hit the roof steady and loud. The defroster hummed. After about 4 miles she said, "I don't have my phone." "Okay," I said. "I left it." I just left it." "Okay." She looked at me then. Just briefly. Like she was checking what kind of man says okay twice without asking a single question. I kept my eyes on the road. Another mile went by. The county line sign appeared in the headlights and disappeared behind us. "I'm not going back," she said. "I didn't ask you to." She turned back to the windshield. Her fingers loosened in her lap, just slightly. The way a wire tension releases when you finally find the right connection. I turned around at the old grain elevator and headed back toward Hartwell. I hadn't planned what came next. I don't have a plan for this situation because this situation had never occurred to me as a possibility. But it was 10:45 at night and raining hard, and she had no phone and no coat and a dress that weighed probably 15 pounds wet, and the only thing I had to offer was the house on Sycamore with the porch light on because I leave it on out of habit. "I've got a spare room," I said. "It's nothing. Single bed, old quilt. But it's dry." She didn't answer right away. The rain filled the silence. "I don't know you," she said. "No. You don't know me either." "No." She looked at the recipe card in the sun visor. Eleanor's handwriting, faded blue ink, a peach cobbler recipe with a note at the bottom that said "Don't rush the butter" and a small star drawn beside it for no reason I ever understood. "Whose handwriting is that?" she said. "My wife's." She looked at me. I kept my eyes forward. "She passed," I said. 18 months ago. She didn't say she was sorry. I appreciated that more than I can explain. She just turned back to the window and watched the rain and said nothing, which was exactly the right thing. I pulled into the driveway on Sycamore. The porch light made a yellow circle in the rain. I got out and came around, and she was already out by the time I reached her side, standing in the mud in ruined white heels, holding that small clutch against her ribs. We walked up to the porch. I unlocked the door. She stepped inside. She stood in the entryway and looked around at the front room, the tool catalogs on the side table, the single mug on the counter, the way a house looks when only one person lives in it. "I'm Nora," she said. "Cal," I said. She gave one short nod. Like we'd just agreed to the terms of something neither of us had fully read. "Thank you," she said. Low. Without looking at me. "Rooms down the hall on the left," I said. "Towels in the closet beside it." She walked down the hall. I stood in the kitchen and listened to the rain and didn't think about much of anything for a long time. One night became 3 days. I didn't plan that either. First morning, I left a pair of Eleanor's old jeans and a flannel shirt outside the spare room door before 6. They were in a box I hadn't opened in 18 months. I opened it without thinking too hard about it and closed it again fast. She came out at 7 wearing them, rolled at the ankles, sleeves pushed up. She looked at the coffee machine and then at me. "It needs descaling," I said. "Does it still work?" "Yeah." "Then it's fine," she said. She poured herself a cup and sat at the kitchen table and didn't try to fill the silence with anything. I ate toast. She drank coffee. The rain was still going outside, lighter now, more of a suggestion than a decision. I had a job that morning, a farmhouse out on Birch Road, old aluminum wiring that needed replacing before someone's kitchen burned down. I told her I'd be back by 2. She nodded. When I got back at 1:45, she was on the porch with a second cup of coffee and a yellow legal pad she'd found somewhere, making a list of something in small, careful handwriting. She didn't explain the list. I didn't ask. That became the pattern. I went to work. She stayed. She wasn't hiding exactly. She walked to the end of the driveway twice that I saw, stood there looking at the road, then came back. Whatever she was working out, she was working it out on her own timeline. That seemed right to me. Some wiring you have to trace all the way back to the source before you understand what went wrong. You can't rush it. On the second day I made eggs. She ate them without complaint, which is more than I could say for myself. I'd been making eggs the same mediocre way for years and had simply accepted it as my ceiling. You overwork them, she said. I know. Lower heat. Pull them before they look done. Eleanor said the same thing. She looked at the pan. Then at me. Did you ever do it? No. She almost smiled. Not quite. But the corner of her mouth moved in a way that suggested a smile existed somewhere nearby and might someday make an appearance. Third morning, I was out in the yard before breakfast checking the breaker on the detached garage. The old hen from 2 houses down, Mrs. Paulson's bird, a mean Rhode Island red that had escaped so many times the whole street had stopped trying to return her, was in my yard again, doing what she always did, which was walk in agitated circles and challenge anything that moved. Nora came out with her coffee and the hen immediately turned and went straight for her. Nora took 1 step back. Then another. Then the hen accelerated and Nora said something under her breath and turned and walked very quickly back toward the porch, which only made the hen more committed, and by the time I looked up from the breaker panel Nora was on the top porch step making a sound I hadn't heard from her yet. She was laughing. Loud and sudden, the kind that caught her off guard too, one hand pressed flat against the porch railing to keep steady. The hen stood at the bottom of the steps looking satisfied. I stood in the yard with my screwdriver and said nothing. But something in my chest did a thing it hadn't done in 18 months. Like a breaker resetting. Small. Almost nothing. But I felt it click. Later we were both crouched at the tailgate sorting a tangle of wire labels I'd been meaning to organize since August. The bed of the truck between us, labels spread out, both of us reading the small print in the afternoon light. My hand went to the same label hers did. We both reached for it at the same moment and my fingers landed over hers on the cool metal surface. Neither of us moved for 1 second. Then she pulled the label free and read it and set it in the correct pile. I picked up the next one. We didn't talk about it. There was nothing to say about it. But I was aware of my hands for the rest of the afternoon in a way I hadn't been in a long time. She told me about the wedding on the 4th day. Not all of it. Just enough. His name was Derek. His family had money the way some families have money, not earned exactly, just accumulated over generations until it became atmosphere. She'd been with him 2 years. Planned the wedding herself, because she was an event coordinator and Derek's mother felt that made her useful in that specific way. She found out 3 hours before the ceremony that Derek had been seeing someone else for 8 months. She found out from a text on his phone that he'd left unlocked on the bathroom counter. She didn't cry telling me this. She said it the way you read a work order. Flat and precise. Why Route 9? I asked. I just drove until I ran out of gas, she said. I didn't pick it. I nodded. That made sense to me. Sometimes you don't pick the place. The place just runs out at the same time you do. She'd called her sister from my landline on day 2. I didn't listen to that conversation. I went out to the garage and found things to organize until she came back inside. She didn't say what was decided and I didn't ask. What I know is she was still there on day 4. And day 5. And I stopped counting after that. She'd contacted her job in Atlanta, remote work, spreadsheets, and vendor coordination, the kind of thing that only needs a laptop and a decent connection. I set her up at the kitchen table with the password to my Wi-Fi and she worked there in the mornings with her coffee while I ate toast and read job orders, and it was quiet and ordinary and I didn't examine it too closely because examined things have a way of changing shape. It was a Thursday when the car pulled up. I was in the side yard replacing an outdoor outlet. Nora was on the porch with her laptop. I heard the car before I saw it, a big silver sedan, the kind that costs more than my truck by a factor of several. It stopped at the curb and 2 women got out, and then a third. The third one I recognized from a photograph Nora had shown me once, on her laptop, accidentally, Derek's mother. Margaret Voss. A tall woman in her 60s with the posture of someone who had never once doubted a decision. She walked up the front path and stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. The 2 women flanked her like punctuation. Nora. Her voice carried across the yard. Not loud. Precise. The way you speak when you've never had to raise your voice to be obeyed. Nora closed her laptop. She didn't stand up yet. She just looked at her. Margaret held up her phone. On the screen was a printed screenshot. I could see it from the yard, though not the details. She said something about a workplace complaint. An accusation filed 2 years ago at an event firm in Atlanta. Said it was a matter of professional dishonesty. Said Nora had a pattern of inserting herself into situations for personal benefit. She said all of this on my front path. Mrs. Paulson was in her garden next door. A man walking his dog had slowed down without stopping. Nora's face didn't change. I set down my wire stripper and walked across the yard and stood at the base of the steps. Not in front of Nora. Beside her. Margaret looked at me the way people look at something they hadn't accounted for. I said, "You drove 2 hours to stand in someone else's driveway." That was all I said. Then I took one step back. Nora stood up. She came down one step so she was level with Margaret, and she said, "That complaint was filed by a man who didn't get a contract he wanted and decided I was the reason. The firm investigated it. It was closed in 3 weeks. You found the filing and not the outcome because you looked for one and not the other." Her voice was level. No shake in it. Hands at her sides, not crossed, not gripping anything. "You're welcome to verify that," Nora said. "I'll wait." Margaret's mouth tightened. Something moved behind her eyes, not doubt exactly, but the first suggestion of it. And underneath that, something older. The brief, unguarded look of a woman who had loved her son past the point of seeing him clearly, and had turned that blind love outward like a flashlight into everyone else's face. She turned and walked back to the car. The 2 women followed. The silver sedan pulled away. I looked at Nora. She was watching the car until it turned the corner. Then she let out a breath through her nose, slow and controlled, and picked up her laptop from the chair. "Thank you," she said. Under her breath. Without looking at me. "You didn't need me," I said. "No," she said. "But it helped." She went inside. I stood on the porch for a moment in the thin afternoon light and looked at the empty street and thought about the way she'd come down that step. Not performing. Not performing at all. The storm came in fast 2 days later. Not rain this time. A real storm, the kind that shows up on weather apps as a red polygon covering half the county and means business. I'd been watching it since morning. By 4 in the afternoon the sky had gone the color of a bruise and the wind was moving through the yard in long low pushes that bent the tall grass flat. I told Nora to stay inside. She said okay, which I should have known meant she'd interpreted that as a suggestion. I went out to secure the garage. There's an old transformer box on the utility pole at the corner of my property, city's equipment, not mine, but I know its condition the way you know the condition of anything you've looked at for years. The bracket holding the secondary line had been loose since August. I'd filed a report. Nothing had happened. That's the thing about utility bureaucracy. It moves slower than weather. I had the garage doors latched and was coming back across the yard when the wind shifted hard and something cracked above me, the kind of sound that has weight behind it, structural weight, the sound of something giving way that was never meant to give way. The line came down across the hood of my truck. Not live, the storm had already knocked the grid in our section. I'd felt the house go dark 10 minutes earlier. But the line was heavy gauge and it came down fast and it took the side mirror clean off and the sound of it was enormous in the sudden quiet after. Nora was already outside. I don't know when she came out. I didn't hear the door. But she was at the corner of the porch when the line came down, maybe 15 feet from the truck, close enough that if she'd been 2 steps further into the yard. I moved before I thought about it. I crossed the yard in the dark and I grabbed her arm and pulled her back toward the porch and we both went down on the wet steps, her back against my chest, both of us breathing hard, the rain coming sideways now, the wind loud and continuous. She turned around. We were close. The porch was narrow and the steps were narrow and there was nowhere to go that wasn't closer. She looked at me the way you look at someone when you've just understood something. I had my hand still on her arm. I didn't move it. I could feel her pulse under my fingers, fast and real. "Cal," she said. "Yeah. The line's not live." "I know that." "So you didn't have to." "I know," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. Rain on the roof above us. Wine through the yard. The truck sitting there with the down line across its hood like a scar. "I don't know when it started," I said. The words came out wrong, not the shape I'd have chosen if I'd planned them. I wasn't looking for anything. I want you to know that. I wasn't waiting for something to happen. I was just driving the same road I always drive and you were. The hen screamed from somewhere in the dark yard. Nora made a sound. A breath that was almost a laugh. Her forehead dropped forward and touched my shoulder and stayed there. I stopped talking. We sat on the wet steps and the storm moved through and neither of us said anything else, and I put my other hand up and held the back of her head the way you hold something you didn't know you'd been afraid to lose. After a while the wind came down. She didn't move away. I didn't ask her to. That night the spare room door stayed open. Not for any dramatic reason. Just because neither of us closed it. Some things don't need a word. They just need both people to leave the door where it is and walk past it and let the night be what it is. I lay in my bed and listened to the rain slow down and thought about how the line hadn't been live. How I'd known that. How I'd moved anyway. Old wiring, I thought. You think you've got it managed. You think you know exactly where the current is and isn't. Then something comes down across the thing you care about and your hands already know what they're doing before your head catches up. 6 months later. The peach cobbler recipe card is still in the sun visor. Eleanor's handwriting, faded blue ink, the small star beside the note about the butter. I've looked at it every Friday night for 2 years and some months now. I don't plan to move it. It belongs there the way certain things belong, not because you decided, but because removing them would be a different kind of decision, one you're not ready to make and maybe never will be. Beside it now, tucked at the same angle, is a drawing. Nora's niece made it back in November when she came to visit for a weekend, a 7-year-old named Iris with strong opinions about everything and a way of studying a room before she entered it fully, like she was checking load-bearing walls. She drew the house on sycamore in purple crayon. Crooked porch, 2 figures standing on it that could be anyone, a large angry-looking bird in the yard that was clearly the hen. She handed it to me without explanation and went back to her cereal. I put it in the visor that same afternoon. Nora was watching from the kitchen window when I did it. I didn't know that until later. She told me at dinner, low, without making a thing of it. I didn't say anything back. I just passed her the bread and she took it and that was enough. It's a Friday. Late October again, almost exactly a year from the night I saw something white on the shoulder of Route 9 and thought it was a deer. We're on the road now. Nora is in the passenger seat with her feet tucked up and a thermos of coffee that she made before we left, real coffee, not the machine I never descaled, a proper pour-over she started making sometime in the spring and that I have never once complained about. The rain is light tonight. More of a suggestion. The wipers are on their slow setting, just keeping up. She's not talking. Neither am I. The radio is finding 2 stations at once the way it always does and she reached over about a mile back and turned it off, and now there's just the road and the rain and the heater running low. This was Eleanor's ritual. The Friday drive. I carried it alone for 18 months like a habit I couldn't explain to anyone including myself. Now Nora is in the seat where Eleanor used to sit and I want to say something careful and true about that, about how it isn't replacement, how nothing is replacement, how a person isn't a slot that another person fills. But I don't have the words for it exactly. I'm an electrician. I think in current and resistance and whether the ground is solid. What I know is that a circuit doesn't work without return. You can run power out all day long but without something that completes it, nothing lights up. Eleanor was my return for a long time. And then the circuit was open and I kept the current running anyway, out of habit or stubbornness or something I called neither of those things. Nora is not Eleanor. The circuit is not the same circuit. It works anyway. The county line sign comes up in the headlights. I slow down at the grain elevator. Start to turn around. Nora puts her hand on the gearshift. Not on my hand. Just near it. The way she does now, without discussion, without announcement. I complete the turn. We head back toward Hartwell, the rain on the windshield, the drawing in the visor catching the edge of a passing streetlight for just a second, a crooked house, 2 figures, 1 very committed hen. I don't have a word for what this is. I have the road, and the rain, and her hand near mine in the dark. That's enough. That's everything.